Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards, with your host, Mel Blackmore.
Hello and welcome to the ISO Show. Well, today I'm delighted to be joined by our guest Dinesh Sharma, who's a Director of Information Security Governance at Epiq. So Dinesh has got 20 years industry experience with about 15 years focused purely on information security. So I'm thrilled that he's joined us today on the ISO Show to discuss ISO 27001, his experience of that standard, how it's working for him, lessons learned, and also how he manages that globally as well for Epiq Global. So really excited to have that conversation with him because he's got a wealth of experience in terms of implementing frameworks like ISO 27001 and PCI DSS. So he's got a ton of experience of developing information security policies, procedures, doing risk assessments, delivering security training and awareness, overseeing internal audits because he's got lots of qualifications in that area too. So prior to working for Epiq Global, Dinesh worked at the Royal Bank of Scotland, and he's also spent a number of years working in InfoSec consultancy. In terms of firms, he's worked for companies like Deloitte and PwC as well. So he's got a wealth of qualifications behind him. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome Dinesh. Hi, Dinesh.
Hi, Mel. Thank you very much. Yeah, appreciate the intro there, and great to be with you on the podcast today.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for joining us. Great. So I haven't really given much of an introduction into what Epiq actually does. Do you mind just sharing with us a bit about the company?
Yeah, sure. So Epiq is a global professional services company. So we primarily provide support to the legal industry. So that's law firms and the legal departments, I guess, of kind of large organizations. And our key service is around something called e-discovery. And e-discovery is where, you know, there's potentially an investigation, or if two parties are about to kind of enter into a litigation, there's a piece before that needs to happen around data collection, data review, processing, forensics, document review. So Epiq can make all of that much more efficient and kind of cost effective for our clients. So that's kind of our key service. Another core service that we provide is around court reporting and transcription services. And we do other things as well, business transformation services, class action, and a range of other services. But yeah, like I said, primarily targeted around the legal industry.
Great, thanks for that. And this is a global organisation as well, isn't it? So how many countries are Epiq operating in at the moment?
I don't know the exact number actually, Mel, but it's probably around about 25, I would say. So we are primarily based in the US. Mm-hmm. That's our kind of largest part of our operations in terms of kind of turnover and number of staff. But we have large offices here in the UK, in London. We're based in Ireland and various locations in Europe, Germany, Poland, Belgium. We have a couple of big offices in India, and we're based in Asia Pac as well, Shanghai, Japan, Hong Kong, as well as Australia. So global company.
Okay, brilliant. So it doesn't matter whether it's to do with British law at all. It's obviously it's not UK centric. It's a global product for any type of legal practice then, or companies that are supporting the legal sector.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have clients around the world, and we provide services to kind of clients where, you know, we don't have necessarily an office based in that country. So, you know, we provide, like I say, services to clients truly around the world.
Okay, cool. I know I gave you a bit of an intro there in terms of your background, but what's your current role at Epiq? What does that look like, Dinesh?
Yeah, sure. So my current role at Epiq is Director of Information Security Governance. So I'm part of the global information security function within Epiq. So we have a dedicated global information security team to support the business. So my specific role is that I lead the security governance side of things. So that means I manage and help to kind of define our information security policy set, our ISMS. I lead and coordinate on our internal security assessment. So part of that might be internal ISMS audits, but I also run quite a few internal security assessments across our business. I review and provide input on the contracts that we have for our clients and vendors around security clauses. So we review those just to make sure that they're in line with our policies and what we do, but also from the vendor side, my team reviews the questionnaires and does that assurance piece around vendors. My team also delivers staff security awareness and training that kind of goes beyond the kind of annual compliance training that we do. And I guess most relevant for today, we also manage the certifications, so the security certifications including ISO 27001.
Great, okay, so yeah, quite a wide range of responsibilities then that you have, and also, you know, managing that team. Talking about teams, a number of the podcasts that we've recorded have been focused around, you know, an individual within an organisation implementing an information security management system. And although that's been really valuable to kind of hear about that journey, it would be really good if we kind of explore, you know, how a mature information security management system is managed if you are fortunate enough to have a team around you. So could you just explain a little bit more about, you know, how did you go about setting up that security team, if that was something that was fairly new that you initiated, or how do you manage that security team? What does that look like in terms of roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, sure. I can talk a little bit about our team. I don't lead the whole of the security team. I lead on the governance side of it. So I'm part of the global security team. So as well as the governance side, we have a dedicated team within our information security function for security operations. And that team looks after the kind of security tool set. They monitor the alerts from that. So, you know, all the kind of tool set things that you would expect. So things like our firewalls, endpoint detection and response, the logging and alerting around network security. That security operations team also takes the lead on defining our processes and handling any security incidents. So we have a separate team for that. We then have a separate team for security architecture and security engineering. And so those teams work very closely with the business to make sure that security is considered and is kind of embedded, I would say, within the projects and the new offerings that we have as a business. So that team works very closely with that, as well as developing our tools. So if we're looking to implement a new security tool, they will be very involved in kind of looking at the different vendors that provide that offering. How would that be embedded within Epiq? How would that work within our infrastructure, and how best would that work with the environments that we have that we're serving our clients with? So we've got that quite well-defined sort of structure of sub-teams within the security function. And then, sitting on top of that, we very fortunate to have some very experienced and very qualified leadership come into that team. So the governance and operations side is managed by a gentleman called Jason Basinski. There's lots of experience, and brings that experience from other industries he's worked with. And he has a peer called Andrew Mabe, who looks after the engineering and architecture side. And then we also have a new CISO, first CISO we've had in Epiq. Very knowledgeable, very savvy, I would say, CISO, and he has kind of been with the company now for probably about 6 months, doing a really good job in terms of lifting the profile of not only security within the organisation, but kind of Epiq's security function as a whole. So we're fortunate to have that leadership as well.
That's fantastic. So I think that when organisations are starting out with implementing an information security management system, we always find that leadership commitment is so key. But it's great to hear that you've already got a mature management system, but you're still continuing to focus on leadership commitment and bringing that in from various angles across the organisation as well. So, I mean, in terms of the ISMS then, because I know that you've got a number of other security standards like PCI DSS, for example. How does the information security management system help you to manage all those activities?
Yeah, we don't actually have PCI DSS within Epiq, so.
Oh, sorry.
But we do have other security certifications, and we do lots of activities and initiatives around security.
Yeah.
But for our ISMS, when we look at ISO 27001, the requirements within ISO 27001, setting up an ISMS that works, I think the most important thing it gives an organisation, I guess regardless of what level of maturity you're at, is what are the basic components and principles in terms of a framework that you should be having in place, or that you should consider to have. Now, if you want to go for certification for ISO 27001, you have to have some of those basic things in place. But I would see it very much as a baseline. So once you've established that baseline and you've got the documentation in place, you've got the processes in place that support that, you've got the staff in place who can deliver on those processes, you then kind of think, right, so we've got that, what can we do then to increase the maturity? And a big part of ISO 27001 is the focus around continual improvement, and that's something I think is really important. That's something I put a lot of focus in my role. So that's all tied with the kind of internal security reviews that we do, with the internal assessments that happen. But any feedback that we get from the business, any feedback that we see or input that we might see, or just discussions that we have with the business that can raise something or that can flag something as actually, that business area is finding this as a potential blocker, or something that can be flagged as maybe being done in a more efficient way. We can just put those on our continual improvement register, work with the teams or work with the business area, or it might be something that we need to do ourselves to kind of go away, identify what needs to be done. But the important thing is to be always looking out for those things, and I think that's probably the most important thing. And it's certainly, like I said, it's a key area of focus that I have, to think about what can improve each step of our ISMS, and then just go away and work on those.
Yeah, because I think a lot of companies, once they've completed the assessment, they think, oh, that's it, that's it, job done, feet up. Well, no, actually, it's only the beginning of the journey, isn't it? Because like you say, that's like your baseline, really, to then, they're your foundations to then use for continual improvement. So, I mean, would you mind sharing with us an example of something that you've implemented in relation to continual improvement that's kind of, above and beyond that baseline that you may have introduced over the last year or so?
Yeah, and just before I do that, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've worked in ISO 27001 and with consultancy firms, and also other organisations where I've been in the in-house team, and it very much does obviously depend on your resources and kind of where you are on that journey. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes there's a big build up to kind of getting the certification, and then things almost drop off a cliff until the next one comes around. So that's obviously not an advisable thing to do, but I can understand how that can happen for organizations with much smaller security teams, and where they don't have the resources. But absolutely, I mean, in terms of some of the things that we've done, so I mentioned the continual improvement process. So I think that the standard talks about having that in place, and depending on how far you want to take that, you could just start off with your audit findings from your last ISO audit, put them on there, and then track those. And that's obviously the first few steps, is to do that from your formal audits. Like I said, what we've done is we've implemented, and this is something that we're doing at the moment actually, it's something called a critical asset review. We've identified our 15 most critical internal assets, and rather than doing a full security review, and there are 130 odd controls in Annex A of ISO 27001, and that would be a very long review. And if you wanted to get the coverage of all of that, you'd probably end up asking quite high level questions and not digging that deep into what the actual risk areas are. So what we decided to do with these critical asset reviews is pick 10 quite important controls, and what we think the controls are that would bring us the highest level of security if we had all of those in place perfectly. So we've done a very focused security review based on risk, based on what we think our most important assets are, and that kind of gives you the biggest bang for your buck, if you like. You kind of do those assessments, you have a very focused assessment, and while it won't tick every single box in your internal audit schedule because you haven't touched necessarily every single control, you do have 3 years to do the whole of those controls. So we're really kind of focusing on what the most important thing is, and like I said, because we achieved our certification a few years ago, we probably have, well, I know we have covered all of the other controls, but like I say, it's probably at a level where we're looking at our policy, we're looking at maybe a level below that. We really want to dig deep in terms of what are the issues, and then what are the risks, and then do something about them and act on them and close them, and that really, I think, moves you forward to another level. So that's one example. I guess another example I kind of touched on, we've invested heavily in our team. So in terms of growing the team, so that in itself brings a level of maturity, because if you're getting people who've got good experience, from a range of industries, you bring in that wealth of knowledge, but also you bring in that experience of how other organizations done these things before. Slightly different environment, slightly different challenges, but the principles are the same, the controls are the same, so you're bringing in that knowledge. That would be another thing. And I think as well as some of the tooling that we've introduced, we've had a big push around security awareness. So a lot of organizations, for security awareness, they might have a annual compliance training, maybe an e-learning thing, which is great. You do that on hire for new hires, you do that annually for all your staff, you retain the records, you maybe have a process around that to make sure people who haven't done that training go back and do it, and you have that chasing. So we had that, but we've added significantly to that over the last 18 months, I'd say. So we do phishing awareness, a big focus around phishing awareness, because that's ultimately where the vast majority of external attacks start from. So we're doing monthly phishing tests where we're sending out mock phishing emails and providing some quick training off the back of that. We're doing,
I think that's really, sorry to interrupt you there, Dinesh, but we found that is so helpful, being able to just break down specific elements of information security and almost providing kind of bite-sized chunks of information and training, as opposed to that full-on, as you said, the annual, e-learning training that might go on, which is quite often in a lot of companies, it's the same training, which can get really dull and boring, and it's not really that inspiring to log on and go through it again. Whereas if you're focusing on specific elements, that is a specific risk that you've identified through your risk assessment methodology, and then you're linking that with tests as well, which can then also link in with obviously putting that information security management system to the test at a really granular level, including obviously you could link in BCP with that as well, I guess.
Yep.
But that's a great way to go ahead. So do you kind of plan that out at the beginning of the year then, in terms of what that awareness training and how that links to your ISMS and risks looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a wonderful manager in my team called Christy, and she produced a governance awareness calendar for the year. And it was literally day by day, week by week, of all of the activities that we had.
Oh, I love that.
Or we'd like to do in terms of awareness. So we've got on there the different weeks that the phishing training is going to be run on each month. We have monthly comms that goes out, and so that might be part of a newsletter, or that might just be a brief comms email to focus on something topical. So it might be something that's taken from our policy, and we just do a bit of a spotlight on it, or it might be something that's happening, or common types of phishing email that might be coming out, or we try and link it to something topical. We have like a SharePoint site which features videos and podcasts as well. So we're trying to explore different channels, like you say, and keep everything bite size, which is important, because otherwise everyone's busy, everyone's kind of got their day job, and we want it to kind of fit in around that. We don't want to take masses of time away, but we equally know that by doing the stuff around awareness, it's potentially the single biggest, most important thing any organization can do to stop that attack happening at that first line of defense.
Exactly. I mean, there isn't much point in having that information security management system in place and that team in place if, across the organisation, individuals aren't aware of how that all works, how that affects them. And it sounds as though it's all becoming part of the DNA of the organisation anyway. So it's part and parcel of everyday working life and how you've integrated information security. But obviously, we can all learn, especially as there are different sorts of issues and risks that are arising all the time. So it's great that that you're helping everybody to kind of keep abreast of what those issues are as well. And I think by breaking it down to, even if it was just kind of 10 minutes, somebody's more likely to retain that 10-minute piece of information than they would if it was like a 2-hour e-learning course.
Yeah, and that's what if you happen to click on a link in the phishing email, that's what the training is. It's like a 5-10 minute training that you have to do just as a refresher. And then obviously we kind of keep track. So we also offer kind of short sessions over like a team session where we would kind of do like red flags on phishing emails and other stuff as well. So, it doesn't necessarily need to be phishing, but on other stuff as well. So we do that. I mean, there's always more you can do, and there's more that we want to do, and there's more that we're planning to do, but it's just an example of, like you said, just a bit more than the annual training.
Okay, cool. I mean, one of the things I like to do on this podcast is to try and dispel some of the myths around ISO standards and bust some of those myths. Mm-hmm. I know that obviously you've been involved with 27001 for quite a long time. But are there any kind of myths that you think are kind of quite common around ISO 27001 that just aren't true, and why that is?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think sometimes it's just an understanding of what it is and, why it's important. And I think that's quite important to explain. So I think for a lot of organisations, the first time management might hear of something like ISO 27001 is that it comes up in a client requirement for a proposal or a new piece of work you're going for, and they might say, right, you need to be aligned to or compliant with ISO 27001. So it's just understanding what that means, and just kind of touching it there. Actually, there's a difference of being aligned to and being certified to ISO 27001. So I think that external independent review of your ISMS is really important, because it shows that you haven't sort of picked and choose which parts of the core standard you're going to implement. You've had to do them all, and you've had that verified, you've had that tested, which provides the level of assurance to you as an organisation, but also your stakeholders. But you have some organisations that talk about aligning to frameworks, and depending on what type of framework it is, that might be the right choice of word. But there's a difference between obviously aligning to something and being compliant with it, which is obviously having that independent assessment of the controls and verifying, looking at evidence that you are doing the stuff, as opposed to an organisation declaring themselves that they align to it. So I think that's something to kind of bear in mind.
Yeah, okay, great. And I'd just like to ask, what do you think's worked well for you from an information security perspective then in relation to ISO 27001? Is there any particular aspect of 27001 that you think, yeah, that bit's my favourite and it's worked really well for us?
I think the most important thing, and probably the most crucial thing in any implementation of a standard, is the top level management commitment, and not necessarily of the security team, because I think that's a given. So I'm talking about the business. So the business just really needs to understand the importance of information security, which I think nowadays most organizations really do have a good understanding of that. But then framing the discussion around a framework like ISO 27001 in a way that's broader than just we'll tick a box in the procurement process, because unless you truly have that commitment from your senior leaders, at some stage there's going to be an implementation of controls that will require the input of the business, that at some point will require them to divert effort to not doing their job, and maybe focusing a little bit on the security side of things, or at least allowing for those security projects to happen or the updates to take place. So as long as the business understand that, the importance of doing that and the risk of not doing that, and that's where I think ISO 27001 provides a framework for doing that. So we do a big part of that in our management reviews. So in our management reviews, we're actually fortunate enough to have our CEO attend them now. And he's been attending them for the last year. We don't have one, we have 4. And so we take the management review section of ISO 27001, cover the majority of it in each of the quarterly meetings that we have. But then over the year, I do a little quick reconciliation to make sure we've touched on every single bit. But because our CEO very visibly supports this, all of the business leaders that report into the CEO, and then all of their directors as well, which is the most senior people across the whole company, they all attend it as well, and so they all get the updates. They all understand what's going on, what's important, what the key risks are from the security team's perspective. It gives them an opportunity to talk to us about whatever's kind of on their mind in terms of risks potentially, but also anything topical that they want us to kind of be involved in. So we have those discussions with them on an ongoing basis anyway, but it just provides that additional channel to do that. So I think that's probably the most important thing, is just kind of making sure everyone's aware of what the benefits are, what's going on, why it's important, and having that communication. It just makes everything a lot easier.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I think just hearing about the different initiatives and how you kind of really taking information security to the next level. It's been really quite inspirational to hear about that journey and how it's still evolving and still developing and still improving and still getting such fantastic commitment from the very top as well. So that clearly demonstrates Epiq Global's commitment to information security without a shadow of a doubt.
Absolutely, I think you touched on the key point there, Mel. It's not something where you feel like we've done this and so that's where we kind of stop. It's always looking to kind of improve, and there's lots of things that we have in the pipeline and that we're kind of working on in flight projects to kind of help improve stuff. And so it absolutely is a process, and so it's always something that we're looking to improve.
Brilliant. Okay then. Well, thanks so much for sharing that with us today, Dinesh. I really appreciate your time and explaining that and answering all those questions. So that's been brilliant. And thanks so much.
No, it's been absolutely great. Thank you, Mel. I really appreciate it.
So for those ISO show listeners that would like to find out a little bit more about Epiq Global services, the link to Epiq Global is in the show notes, along with the information that we've been sharing in today's podcast. But the website is epiqglobal.com. So you can find out all about the organisation on the website there. So thanks once again for listening. Obviously there's other podcasts that we've recorded on ISO 27001 and how to implement it, as well as other standards associated with 27001, like ISO 27017, the cloud security standard, or ISO 27701, which is the standard that supports GDPR compliance around data privacy. So lots of other material there for you to tune in and listen to. Thanks once again for listening, and I look forward to catching you on the next ISO show.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.